Hi, my name's Thete, an experienced Retribution Paladin who's been raiding for quite a long time in World of Warcraft, and what I'm doing is a series of guides for the Retribution Paladin in Legion. In the meantime, I'm putting weekly updates on according to the changes that Blizzard make with their tuning for both PTR and beta, and this is a rundown of this week's. So this week's there's been a few changes. None of them really changed the decision making that I'd have gone through in the last couple of update videos, but just to bring you up to date because there have been a few. Now the first thing I want to point out is actually something Brian Helinka said with the PvP Q&As. I talked about this if you watched my news video that I also brought out today. They say that they are tuning around Legion launch, not a full artifact. Now, I'm not sure that then certain things make sense, but I just putting that there at the beginning because it has an effect on some of these tuning that's been going on, and I also want to come back to that when I talk about one thing in particular. But in terms of what's changed, Zeal has been nerfed a little bit. Now, the question people have generally been asking is which to use, Zeal or Fires of Justice, if you want to buff your Crusader Strike. In a single target situation, the only other thing that competes with those talents is Greater Judgment, which for single target is of course not going to win out. Generally speaking, you would think Fires of Justice is better on a single target. In point of fact, we have to bear in mind that both Fires of Justice and Zeal are good single target abilities, and both of them have some usefulness in an AoE situation. Zeal's usefulness is obvious because when we build up our 3 stacks of Zeal, it can cause Crusader Strike to chain, albeit in a weaker form, to nearby mobs. It's an obvious AoE ability. But Fires of Justice also has some AoE ability in that it gives us this random chance to proc so that our next Holy Power spender costs 1 Holy Power fewer. That means that over the course of a longish fight, we're going to be able to use more Holy Power spenders. And if those spenders happen to be Divine Storm in an AoE situation, then that means Fires of Justice is giving us some AoE benefit. The fact also that it has a shorter recharge time means that we can build up Holy Power quicker, and again through that generate more Holy Power spenders. So both of them have some AoE use. Zeal we have to be a little bit careful of. The Zeal chaining has often been a bit weird. It's like works very poorly one time and then the next build it's sort of okay and then it goes poorly again. We just have to be a little bit careful. It doesn't always chain to things very far away from us or from our target. So often we like things to be grouped up very close together because, yeah, sometimes the chaining works a little bit weird. In terms of which one we would use, though, and you sort of put the numbers in, both Fires and Justice and Zeal on a single target are sort of looking okay, either one. Fires of Justice maybe now is sneaking ahead, but again, that is assuming that we're going to use it off cooldown. And I just think for reasonable haste levels, and they don't have to be very high, I personally find it difficult to do that. There are higher priority things to use at the same time, and some of them will be going to waste, and it doesn't have to go to waste for very long before all of a sudden Zeal is actually going to do you more damage overall. And as I say, for AoE, both of them have some benefit, but Zeal, as long as it's going to chain correctly, has sort of more benefit or more reliable benefit certainly in an AoE situation, because Fires of Justice you're just waiting for it to proc. Well, maybe it'll proc when you want it to and maybe it won't. Templar's Verdict has also been nerfed slightly. This also means that along with the nerf to Blade of Justice, that all 3 forms of Blade of Justice have effectively been nerfed. Virtue's Blade, Blade of Wrath and Divine Hammer. The baseline nerf to Blade of Justice has of course provided them with a nerf, but also the component that we add in for the fact that they're generating 2 Holy Power and therefore we're getting some benefit from the Crusader Strike that they're generating also means that they are it's weaker from that point of view. Again, it doesn't seem to make a great deal of difference what you'd use. in an AoE or even 2-target cleave situation, Divine Hammer is going to be better. It's just going to be better than the other two, as long as we can consistently have multiple mobs around us. When it comes to Virtue's Blade or Blade of Wrath, it depends on our crit value. I would say for the pre-patch, when the pre-patch goes live, those of us who've got Retribution Paladins that have been geared up to a reasonable degree are probably going to have a decent amount of crit. Anything significantly more than 20% seems to be, at the moment, all we need for Virtue's Blade to be better. So, if you've got significantly more than that, Virtue's Blade in a single target situation. Blade of Wrath, if it's much weaker. So, I am... again, there's lots of tuning potentially going to happen now, but at the moment I am thinking in terms of, okay, when it goes live for the pre-patch, I'm probably going to use Virtue's Blade. As I level up and I get to a level 110, I'm probably going to be switching to Blade of Wrath because my crit's going to come down in terms of percentage chance. So there's not a great deal to talk about on those ones, and it doesn't change what the situation was before. Now, in terms of some more interesting changes, Retribution, not the spec, the ability, the passive baseline ability. This is the ability that means that when a party or raid member dies, we get a buff. Okay, this has gone through several iterations. When it first came in, when Alpha was first launched, or when the public version of it, NDAs were dropped, all the rest of it, it meant that for the next 10 seconds, you had a 100% damage increase. That was knocked swiftly on the head down to 50%. So that's where it's been for several months now. You get 10 seconds of 50% DPS increase. This is great. Downside to it, from my point of view, is when it comes to progress, because I'm thinking very much time in terms of raid progress. Now, you do get sometimes a lot of people, especially a lot of people who sort of pretend they are taking an interest in raid progress, often don't delve into the figures really well. And this is really bizarre now that we have, especially Warcraft logs, which is a great deal more detail than the World of logs that we had for many years. It's very easy now to find information, but a lot of people just don't look for it. One typical example of this is, like, you're learning a boss, and let's say it's a boss that's going to take you several nights to be able to kill it. Some bosses take several weeks, but let's, it takes several nights at least. So what you do is you're wiping probably after a minute or maybe a minute and a half. And who looks like they're doing the best? Well, the ones with the best burst at the start, because they're able to fire off all their cooldowns. Their cooldowns are very powerful. But they don't necessarily get to use them very often in a fight. They look artificially high at the start of the fight. As the fight goes on, you know that it's going to even out a little bit more. People with good, strong executes, now there's going to be far fewer of those classes, far, far fewer. They will look strong at the end of a fight, of course, but maybe weaker towards the start of it. So it's very difficult to analyse, if you feel that DPS is an issue, how you change it around, because you've got to sort of think long term, and it's very difficult to do that. This Retribution ability had the problem of doing the opposite to the execute, really. In other words, it makes you look better on progress, but artificially better. Because on progress, of course, you're going to have people dying. And even when you get into advanced wipes, people are going to be dying. That's what's causing you to wipe in most cases. It's very rare, although it does sometimes happen, it's very rare to have a boss where you're just not beating the timer and it just enrages and blows everyone up. But everyone was alive up to that point. That's quite unusual, because if everyone's alive up to that point and that's still happening, it's probably that your just gear's not very good. But they don't tend to do gear check bosses like that anymore. So what's going to happen is you're getting this 50% buff every time someone dies, as long as you're not the one dying, and your damage looks amazing. But when you kill the boss, that's the point at which people stop dying. All of a sudden, it's dropped quite low. It's deflating for you as the Retribution Paladin, and everyone else is looking at it and going, what the hell, man? You were doing brilliant before. It's like, well, yeah, sorry, people aren't dying anymore. So now they've changed it, and it's a little bit better now. So it goes from 50% increased damage to 20% increased damage done. So again, it softens that artificially inflated damage we're going to be doing. But here's something really good. It gives us 30% reduced damage taken. And it also lasts for 20 seconds as opposed to 10 seconds. Now, this is awesome, because what it means is, let's say there's, if someone dies just because they do something stupid, all right, that just kills them. But let's say it's for some serious raid-wide damage going on, and, the healers at this point just haven't sorted it out. Well, it kills someone, but let's say it doesn't kill you as quickly. As soon as it kills someone, you've suddenly got a 30% damage reduction. It's going to last for 20 seconds as well. So it's going to last quite a while. That could be the thing that saves you. Maybe you would have died 3 seconds later. Now you're not going to. So you've got your damage buff, and you've got 30% reduced damage taken, which makes you less likely to die to the thing that just killed someone else. And this can happen fairly frequently. I mean, you know, if people stagger dying for every 20 seconds, that'd be ideal, but they're probably not going to. But throughout the fight, people die every now and then. You're not only getting, albeit a smaller damage buff, but we don't really want the big damage buff, as I say, because it's artificial. But we get that damage reduction, which can help us to survive. And in terms of the other things that have changed, it's all the level 100 talents have all been buffed. Now, this is where I'm going to come back to them saying how they're tuning it. They're tuning it for, you know, starter legion, but not full artifact power. And I'm really going to focus in on Crusade here, but I'm just going to quickly explain what all the talents are. So Crusade itself increases your, instead of Avenging Wrath increasing your damage and healing by 35% last 20 seconds, it increases it by 2.5%, but it also increases your haste, and it will increase by an extra 2.5% damage and haste every time you spend a holy power, up to a maximum of 15 stacks. Now, there's a number of issues with this. The first one, in its old form, it's where it was 2% increased damage and haste, was that it's worse than baseline Avenging Wrath. In other words, this is a talent that is worse than taking nothing. So, and a lot of people can think to themselves, oh, but yeah, but with our 2-set bonus from tier 18, we get more charge of Avenging Wrath. Surely this makes Crusade better. Well, if Crusade itself is worse than normal Avenging Wrath, how does having more of them make it better? It doesn't. It's still just bad. The other thing, the curious thing is that it was the worst talent out of the three. Divine Purpose, which gives us a chance to proc so that our next Holy Power spender costs nothing, including the 5 Holy Power Justicar's Vengeance, which is great. Holy Wrath. Holy Wrath is a bit weird for PvE because it all depends. If every 3 minutes you are able to arrange to have very little health, you can actually do quite a lot of damage with this. The problem is arranging for that situation to occur. But the thing is, all of these talents have been buffed, but Divine Purpose has gone from a 15% chance to a 20% chance. Holy Wrath, from a PvE point of view, I'm not going to look at the PvP one, has gone from 150% of your missing health in terms of damage to 200%. So both of those have been increased by a third. We've gone from 15% to 20%, we've gone from 150% to 200%. That is a 1/3 increase in effectiveness. 33% buff. Crusade has gone from 2% to 2.5%. That's a 25%. That's a quarter increase in damage. So Crusade, which was already the weaker of the three, has only been buffed by 25% as opposed to 33% for the others. So surely the gap has increased. So then you start to think, and what they're doing, by the way, when they're doing this, and it's a perfectly valid mathematical technique. I've done this a lot of times with physics. I'm a physicist. And it's called trial and improvement. So what they're doing, when they're working out these values, it's the same with this retribution. You know, they've decided that the significant damage increase isn't really working, so they've gone for a much smaller damage increase and a damage reduction. Now, the values they've chosen have not been carefully calculated. Of course not. They're just throwing random numbers in. They're throwing darts at a wall. And they'll try it out. And then if that doesn't work, they'll just sort of modify it up or down. You can always tell they're doing this because all the numbers are fairly sort of arbitrarily tidy, aren't they? They're always sort of multiples of 5% usually. I know Crusade's gone for a 2.5%. But you'll never see anything like, you know, such and such has a 13.279 chance to proc or something like that, unless it's related to item level on a trinket. So they're just firing random numbers in and see what happens. And that's fine. That's perfectly valid, as I say. But my issue is, so we're looking at this, and theory crafters have calculated this, that over the course of a fight, Crusade is the worst of those talents. So when you come to buff them, why would you buff it less than the other two? That just increases the gap. So then you think to yourself, okay, they must be thinking about a situation where Crusade's actually quite good. For it not good enough, that's why it's been buffed. But very good compared to Divine Purpose and Holy Wrath, because they feel that they should buff Divine Purpose and Holy Wrath more. Well, not if they're doing what they're saying and tuning for the start of Legion. But then another thought occurred to me based on something Sol Sacrosade, who is the sort of senior theory crafter for Retribution Paladins in PvE. And he was talking about mastery on the Paladin Discord, if any of you are on that, and saying that, you know, because when the pre-patch goes live, at the moment, as things stand, mastery is our worst stat, which is a bit of bad news when at the moment it's our best stat and we've got it gemmed and enchanted and all the rest of it. And it's a question of, well, why would that be? And he made the point that actually mastery becomes much stronger with certain legendaries. Now, maybe they're tuning around us having certain legendaries. That would be rather worrying, because I think it's going to take us longer to reliably get the legendaries we want than it would to get a full artifact, I would have thought anyway. Because there's lots of legendaries we could potentially get. Most of them are crap in terms of their effects. I would say 4 of them are good. 2 of them are very good in terms of giving us a direct damage increase. And I have done a video on the legendaries some time ago. I'll link that there. But the 2 really good ones is a cloak and there's a ring. Now, the cloak means that when we use something like Templar's Verdict, as long as we use another one within 4 seconds, then the damage is increased. Well, as this is something that benefits from mastery, as long as we use it during the judgment window, this surely increases the value of mastery, and yes it would. So having this cloak and making sure that we have good holy power generation so that we can use Templar's Verdict very quickly. Even, quite frankly, I think it gets to the point where if we have this along with the ring during Avenging Wrath, we won't even bother about the judgment window. But anyway, so we're using Templar's Verdict quite a lot. We're getting benefit from that. We're getting more benefit from mastery. So maybe the tuner is around us having that legendary cloak. Well, similar thing might be true of Crusade. Now, when the pre-patch goes live, Crusade is clearly going to be crap. Because to get it up to the 15 stacks, we're going to need to save 5 holy power. We can't do this at the start of the fight. Anyway, if the ring's going to be fired off straight away, we've got to surely fire off Avenging Wrath. So, but in other times in the fight, we need to save up 5 holy power. Fire off Crusade, we need to spend that 5 holy power really quickly. We could use a Justicar's Vengeance. It's not as holy power efficient, but it means we're stacking up very quickly. But then we need to generate and spend another 10 holy power. As a Blood Elf, maybe you'll be able to use Arcane Torrent, get an extra 1 sneaky one generated there. But that's about it. And it'll take a certain amount. And remember, this Avenging Wrath, even with Crusade, only lasts 20 seconds. So by the time we've built it all up, we haven't got very much longer to use it. Admittedly, because it's stacking up haste as well, it means we can more quickly generate those things. And again, that comes back to what I was talking about before about Zeal maybe on balance being a better one. But I'm going to come to those as part of my summary. But when Legion goes live, first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our one of the first things, get our Ashbringer. And the first trait we're going to go for on the Ashbringer is something called Ashes to Ashes. This base, without going into too much detail right now, do that later in later videos. But not to put too fine a point on it, it gives us an ability that has a 30-second cooldown, and when we hit something with it, it generates 5 holy power instantly. So now when we're using Crusade, we can save up 5 holy power, hopefully, spend it in one go on Justicar's Vengeance, use this ability that generates 5 holy power, do another Justicar's Vengeance. In 3 globals, we've spent 10 holy power, so we've got plus 25 damage and haste. The extra 25% haste, of course, is now going to allow us to very quickly, if we weren't already able to do this, build up the remaining 5 holy power and spend it really quickly. So we've now got our maximum 15 stacks, and we've got a decent amount of time left on Avenging Wrath. In addition to which, there are traits on the Ashbringer which will take some time to get to if we go to Ashes first, but we can get to those, and they can extend the duration of Avenging Wrath. So with 3 points spent on that, and let's say a relic that extends it as well, we could maybe have an extra 10 seconds on that. At that point, something like Crusade looks stronger. In addition, if we get the legendary ring, that means we generate just passively holy power while we've got Crusade active. It means that we can build it up more quickly still. But that would assume that they're tuning Crusade around a full artifact, but they say they're not. So for my mind, there's a little bit of inconsistency here. All I would say is that at the moment, and we're focusing at the moment on the pre-patch rather than when Legion goes live, that'll come later, I would discount Crusade completely. I've already talked about, just from a philosophical point of view, if you like, why Crusade is not that great with, you know, in the pre-patch. This is just another reason. I would go for Divine Purpose all the way. When it comes to, just to finish off now, I'm going to come back to sort of like the Zeal Fires of Justice issue. Obviously, yeah, Zeal has been nerfed a bit. If we're using our Crusader Strike off cooldown, which we're not always, but if we were, Fires of Justice on single target is going to look better. What I would say is we need to try and be flexible. In a dungeon, I've already discussed in that last update video why Zeal might be better just from being more flexible, because we can't change our talents at will. What I would say is when the pre-patch goes live, it's still going to be quite tricky to change talents from fight to fight, because the item that we may well have for Legion raids that scribes make, even though it's quite expensive, but it might be worth it as a raid resource, is not going to be available, is it, when this pre-patch goes live? Because the new professions aren't going to come into it. So the only way to change talents is to Hearthstone out to our garrison and get a summon monkey to bring us back. Is that a delay that people are going to want to be doing? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. So maybe in this situation, Zeal becomes just a nice flexible one to use on any fight, generally speaking. But anyway, that's where I leave it there. It's taken a little bit of time. There's only so many changes, but you know, I think they are changes that were worth discussing. In terms of what's coming next, I've already mentioned, but I'll mention again here because it's more relevant here. There are 2 class and spec guides going to be coming out, my intention, in the next 8 days. I am going to give Blizzard one more chance this week to see if they're going to change any more mechanics. If they are not, if it's just more tuning, which is what I'm hoping for, then I am going to bring out the Havoc Demon Hunter pre-patch guide. I'm aiming for that within the next week, and as in within the next 6 or 7 days. And the Retribution one, the fuller one that I've tried to bring out a couple of weeks ago, and then they changed a load of mechanics. That will be back at the latest a week tomorrow, so that'll be at the latest what we're talking about, the 10th of July. It may come out a little bit earlier. It all depends, because I sort of finish work on Wednesday. Then I've got a couple of, well, I've got 7 weeks off, but a couple of days off specifically to be able to not only just tidy up the script and make sure that I can do the narration on that, but also get the footage that I need, all the rest of it. At the moment, my hard drive is quite full. I want to use this footage and I can delete it and then move on anyway. So that's my intention with that. If you've got any questions about what I've talked about today, of course, put them down there. The live Q&A as well, once they announce when the pre-patch is going to go live. And I'm expecting that announcement within the next week, because I don't think it's going to be much later, but we'll see. I'll be able to announce the date when I'm going to be doing that. And again, I'll take questions that people have been asking and use that as the sort of framework for that live Q&A. So, hope you found it useful as always. If you have, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.